Noah hadn't stepped foot inside the house in over 4 years. The porch light flickered weakly above him as he twisted the rusted key in the lock. The same key that had hung on a chain beside his mother's apron hooks in the kitchen, a kitchen that hadn't existed in his memory without the smell of fresh cinnamon bread and the faint hum of her singing. The door creaked open into a thick silence. The air inside was heavier than he remembered, stale, almost damp, and it carried the faint scent of old wood, dust, and something faintly metallic. The walls still wore the same faded wallpaper with tiny blue tulips peeling now at the corners like skin after a burn. His boots echoed hollowly as he stepped inside. Noah's eyes instinctively drifted to the hallway, to the worn corner where his mother used to pause every morning, coffee in one hand, humming some forgotten lullaby. The house felt paused in time, but not abandoned. It felt aware. He dropped his duffel bag by the stairs and ran a hand through his hair. This was just paperwork. Sort the documents, talk to the lawyer, and put the house on the market. He wouldn't even need to stay more than a couple nights. That night, he tried to sleep in his old bedroom, the same one he'd had since he was 6, but the silence pressed in too tightly. The ticking of the old grandfather clock downstairs, the creak of old floorboards adjusting in the night. It all felt amplified. Unfamiliar. He was still half asleep, somewhere between dreams and memory when he heard it. Noah? The voice was soft, sing-songy, familiar. It came from the kitchen. His eyes snapped open. The room was dark except for the streetlight bleeding through the blinds. He lay still for a few seconds, heart thrumming. He dreamt it. Had to have. Nuoth. This time it was clearer. Gentle, almost playful. His mother's voice. Exactly as he remembered it. But she had been dead for 5 years. Burned alive in this very house. He sat up, pulse pounding in his ears. "Hello," he called, voice tight and low. Silence. Creeping to the top of the stairs, he listened, but the house had returned to its hush. Still, he found himself descending, barefoot, into the dark. The kitchen light was off, but he could smell something faintly floral, his mother's old hand soap. The room looked the same, eerily preserved. The kettle, dusty on the stove. The chipped ceramic mugs in their usual place. Nothing out of place, except for one thing. Steam. Rising gently from the cups sitting on the counter. Noah didn't move. He hadn't made tea. The air was impossibly still. A quiet, old tune drifted from the living room behind him, his mother's lullaby, the same one she used to hum when he was sick. Except there were no speakers in that room. No radio. Nothing. His breath caught in his throat. Slowly, he backed away from the counter, eyes fixed on the steaming cup. That's when he heard the soft click of the kettle turning off by itself. He ran. Back upstairs, he shut the bedroom door behind him and leaned against it, heart in his throat. He wanted to believe it was just his mind, grief, memory, the strain of being back in this house. But deep down, he knew what he'd heard. His mother's voice. Calling from a kitchen she hadn't stood in since the night it burned. Noah didn't sleep that night. He stayed curled under the covers like a child, eyes fixed on the shadows shifting across the ceiling. Every creak in the house felt deliberate. Every whisper of wind outside sounded like his name. By morning, he was raw. He didn't bother with breakfast, just black coffee and a shaking hand. His mind raced in loops, trying to rationalize what he'd heard. What he'd seen. The tea. The humming. The voice. The house was old, sure. His grief was deep. But tea doesn't make itself. By noon, he had convinced himself there had to be a real explanation. Someone was messing with him. Someone had to be in the house. So he drove to the hardware store, bought 3 motion sensor cameras, and returned with shaking fingers and eyes bloodshot from sleep deprivation. He placed one at the top of the stairs, one in the kitchen, and one facing the back hallway, where the air always felt just a bit colder, even in summer. He synced the cameras to an old laptop and hit record. That night, he sat on the couch with a baseball bat beside him. A lullaby didn't come. No lights flickered. No voices called from the kitchen. The silence was almost worse than the activity. It made him feel crazy, like he had hallucinated the whole thing. But when he checked the footage the next morning, everything changed. He started with the kitchen cam. The first hour was nothing. Empty frame. Quiet. Then, just after 2:41 a.m., something moved. Noah leaned in, heart kicking into overdrive. The timestamp ticked forward. At the edge of the frame, the shadows shifted, and a figure stepped into view. Female. She moved slowly, methodically, her back to the camera, her posture unmistakable. The way she stood at the stove. The way she reached up to the cabinet with that slight hitch in her shoulder, the one his mom always had after breaking her collarbone years ago. The way her hair fell in soft, dark waves. It was her. Noah's throat went dry. He paused the footage. Rewound. Watched it again. The figure stood at the stove. Tilted her head. Reached for the kettle. Poured. Then she turned slightly, just enough to catch a glimpse of her cheek. That's when the footage glitched. Not just a flicker. Not static. A full corruption, horizontal lines, color distortion, timecode freeze. Like the recording itself rejected the moment. When it resumed 5 seconds later, the woman was gone. Noah sat back, staring at the screen like it had personally betrayed him. He replayed the footage again and again, frame by frame. Same result. Smooth movements, then corruption. No clear face. No full profile. Just the unmistakable presence of a woman who had died 5 years ago. Noah checked the other cameras. The upstairs hallway was still. The back hallway caught nothing. Only the kitchen camera, only that moment. He didn't upload the footage. Didn't save it to the cloud. Something about it felt wrong. He left the laptop open on the table, shut the kitchen door behind him, and stood outside for a long while, breathing in the cold air like it was the only real thing left. And that night, as he lay in bed once again, wide-eyed in the dark, the house was silent. Until 2:41 a.m., when he heard the soft click of the kettle turning on again. By the third night, Noah stopped pretending he wasn't afraid. He left every hallway light on, every door cracked just slightly, just enough to see if something passed through. The cameras remained where they were, but he no longer trusted them. That glitch, that corruption in the video, it felt deliberate. As if something knew it was being watched and didn't want to be seen. He started hearing things that weren't on tape. It began with soft scratching behind the walls. Barely audible, like mice. Then came the tapping, 3 slow knocks. Sometimes from inside the closet. Sometimes from behind the headboard. And then, the whispers. They began faint, like a breeze rustling through floorboards. But they grew bolder by the hour, a garbled murmur of voices behind plaster and paint. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, urgent, warning, alive. Noah would stop whatever he was doing and tilt his head, breath caught in his chest, trying to catch even one clear sentence. But the second he focused, they faded. On the 4th night, he followed the sound. It led him to the attic. The pull-down ladder creaked as he ascended, flashlight trembling in his grip. The attic was, as he remembered, dust-choked and cramped, smelling of insulation and old wood. Boxes were stacked haphazardly along the slanted walls, some untouched since his childhood. The whispers grew louder the farther he crawled in. They seemed to bleed from behind a particular section of wall, one covered with warped wooden paneling stained dark from moisture or something else. Something about the panel felt off. The nails were newer than the rest, as if someone had covered something recently. He pried at the edge. The wood creaked and gave way, revealing not insulation, but a hollow space. Inside, nestled like a secret waiting to be found, was a scorched, blackened notebook. He pulled it out with shaking hands, brushing off ash that coated its cracked leather cover. The edges of the pages had melted together in places, and the spine was brittle with heat damage. Still, it opened. Inside, his mother's handwriting. Loopy, soft cursive that started strong and familiar, but slowly descended into jagged scrawl. At first, the entries were mundane. Grocery lists. Short updates on Noah's school. Random thoughts. But as the pages went on, the tone changed. He's lying again. He said he was at work, but the car was cold when he got home. I think he's reading this journal. I need to hide it better. There's someone in the house at night. Not him. I hear breathing outside the bedroom door. I don't sleep anymore. And then the final entry, barely legible, scrawled at an angle across the burned page. Don't trust your father. Noah's hands went numb. He sat in the attic for a long time, the journal on his lap, the weight of its last words pressing down on him like a lead blanket. Don't trust your father. His father, who had died only 2 months ago. Who had always seemed distant, rigid, unreachable. Who had barely spoken of his mother's death, only once, and even then with eyes cast down. Noah thought back to the kitchen, the kettle, the tea, the lullaby, and now this journal hidden behind a false wall. Something inside this house was trying to talk to him. And something else didn't want him listening. As he climbed back down from the attic, he realized something chilling. The whispers had stopped. Not faded. Stopped. As if they were waiting to see what he'd do next. The journal haunted him. Noah couldn't stop rereading that final entry, "Don't trust your father." It echoed in his head like a bell every time he looked at the house, every time he passed the charred kitchen doorway, every time he caught himself reaching for a memory that now felt tampered with. His father had always been secretive, but he had chalked it up to grief. Now, the silence felt strategic. What was he hiding? Noah decided to return to the attic. Not because he wanted to, but because something inside told him there was more. He climbed the ladder with a flashlight in one hand and gloves in the other. He sifted through old boxes, most of them useless, baby clothes, yellowed receipts, holiday decorations long melted together by heat. Then, beneath a bundle of old bedsheets, he found a showbox labeled Camp 1989 in his mother's handwriting. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, curled and sticky from years of neglect. Smiling faces at a lakeside, tents in the background, grainy flash shots of teenage sleepovers. Most of them were familiar. His mother in her late teens, laughing in cut-off jeans and a tie-dye arm around a friend. Her handwriting on the back of each, me and Karen, me and Layla at the dock, the girls at bonfire. But one photo stopped him cold. It was older than the others. Faded at the corners. His mother was maybe 17, standing stiffly beside a man. Not a teenager, a grown man. Mid-30s maybe. Clean-shaven. Tall. Too close to her. Noah turned it over. No handwriting. No name. Just the scrawl of a black marker, mostly rubbed off. Only one word remained legible: beware. He stared at the man in the photo. Something about him felt familiar. The shape of his jaw. The sharp line of his brow. And then it hit him. Mr. Wallace. The quiet neighbor from across the street. The one who always watched from his porch but never waved. The one who hadn't come to offer condolences when Noah's father passed. Stomach tight, Noah slipped the photo into his jacket pocket and left the house. He crossed the street and knocked twice. The porch was dusty, the lawn unkempt. He hadn't seen Wallace in days. After a long pause, the door creaked open. Mr. Wallace looked thinner than he remembered. Pale. Older. As if the years had drained him dry. His eyes flicked to Noah's face, and then immediately to the jacket pocket, as if he could feel the photo's presence. "I need to talk to you," Noah said, trying to keep his voice steady. Wallace didn't answer right away. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then, finally, he muttered, "You shouldn't have gone into the attic." That stopped Noah cold. Wallace stepped outside and closed the door behind him. "Whatever she left for you, don't follow it. Don't dig." "What do you know about this?" Noah demanded, pulling out the photo. Wallace flinched at the sight of it. "I told her not to stay. Told her to get out while she still could." "Who is he?" Wallace shook his head. "You think you're looking for ghosts, but that house doesn't play fair. It remembers everything. It feeds on what's buried." "What happened to my mother?" Noah asked. Was the fire really an accident? Wallace's face crumpled with something between fear and guilt. "If you stay in that house, it'll start again. And this time, it'll finish what it couldn't before." He turned without another word and shut the door behind him. Noah stood there for a long moment, photo trembling in his grip. Across the street, the house waited. Still. Watching. Noah didn't sleep that night. He tried, but his mind wouldn't quiet. The attic. The journal. The photo. Mr. Wallace's trembling voice. "It'll start again." What did that mean? Start what? Noah wandered the house well past midnight, unable to shake the growing weight in his chest, the sense that the walls themselves were pulsing. Like the house had a heartbeat. A memory. A hunger. By 2 a.m., he found himself in the basement. He hadn't been down there in years. It always felt colder than the rest of the house, not just temperature-wise, but in energy. The kind of cold that sunk into your teeth and made your spine want to leave your body. He took the stairs slowly. Flashlight in one hand, his breath fogging in front of him. The basement was mostly unfinished, concrete floor, exposed beams, and a smell like mold and copper. Shelves lined the walls with boxes of tools and old paint cans. The fuse box sat in the far corner, humming quietly. Noah swept the light across the space and stopped. There, at the far end of the wall behind a shelving unit, was a door he had never noticed before. It was metal. Industrial. Out of place in a house like this. and it was sealed shut, chained, and bolted from the outside. 4 heavy chains looped through the handle and across the frame. Old rusted padlocks kept them in place. The wood around the hinges was scarred and blackened, as if someone had tried and failed to burn the door shut at some point. Noah's pulse thundered in his ears. He stepped closer, pressed his hand to the door. Cold, freezing like the surface of a grave. He dropped to one knee and peered at the gap between the door and the floor. Pitch black. Then something moved behind it. He stumbled back, flashlight shaking. The chains rattled just once, sharp and fast, like something on the other side had touched them, or maybe tested them. Noah stood frozen. Then, without warning, a piece of paper slipped out from beneath the door. It floated slowly to the floor, landing near his feet. Noah crouched, hand trembling as he picked it up. It was yellowed, water-stained, and smelled of soot. Scrawled in black ink, not his mother's handwriting, but still familiar, were the words, "You're not alone. You never were." He bolted. Up the stairs, 2 at a time. Locked the basement door behind him. Collapsed onto the floor of the kitchen, breath heaving in his throat. The paper still in his hand. You're not alone. That night, every creak of the house felt heavier. Deliberate. The shadows no longer felt still. And the whispers returned, but this time they came from beneath him. Noah couldn't shake the words from the basement. You're not alone. The more he thought about it, the more it sounded like a warning, something beyond the house's eerie atmosphere. Something that had been watching him, waiting for him to find the door. But the question still burned in his mind. What was behind it? What or who was locked away in that room? Why hadn't he ever noticed it before? That question hung over him all day. His only escape was to dig further, deeper into the wreckage of his father's life, hoping to find something, anything, that could explain this nightmare. He went into his father's study that evening, a room he'd left largely untouched since his father's death. The smell of leather-bound books and old tobacco lingered in the air, heavy and comforting in its familiarity. But as he sat at the desk and booted up his father's old laptop, the comfort quickly gave way to unease. The laptop hummed to life with a slow, mechanical slowness that felt almost intentional. Noah's fingers hovered over the keyboard, suddenly unsure of what he was looking for. But he couldn't stop himself. He had to know. He searched through old files. Tax returns. Business reports. Pictures from vacations he couldn't remember. Nothing stood out until he stumbled upon a folder labeled personal. It was password protected. His stomach tightened. Noah sat back, frustration creeping into his chest. His father had been a man of secrets, but Noah had always assumed it was just his quiet nature. Now every small action felt like a carefully constructed wall meant to hide something darker. He gritted his teeth and entered his father's old passcode, the same one he'd used for years. The screen blinked to life, revealing a few more folders. But only one file caught Noah's attention. A voicemail file. His heart pounded in his chest as he clicked it. The voicemail began with static. A faint, crackling noise, and then a voice, a woman's voice, soft, strained, almost drowned out by the noise in the background. He's planning something. Tonight. Noah froze, his eyes glued to the screen. The timestamp at the top of the file was from the night of the fire 5 years ago. You have to stop him. It's too late for me, but you can still save him. He's planning something. He's. The voicemail cut out abruptly, replaced by a sharp screech of static. Noah's breath caught in his throat. His mind raced. The woman's voice, she was warning someone. Someone about his father. She said he was planning something. But what? Was this the same night the fire had broken out? Why hadn't he heard about this voicemail before? Noah replayed it over and over, trying to make sense of the garbled words. It's too late for me. Who was she? Why hadn't this voicemail been shared with the authorities? What had his father been involved in? He sat there, staring at the file, his mind spiraling. His father had never once mentioned this, never spoken of anything that could explain the fire. His father's secret was bigger than Noah could imagine. And it wasn't just about the fire. It was about the truth that had been hidden from him all this time. But there was something else. Something that gnawed at the back of his mind. The voice. It sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. A creeping suspicion crawled under his skin, one that made his blood run cold. The more Noah thought about it, the more the woman's voice reminded him of someone he knew. A voice he had heard in passing in the kitchen, humming a lullaby. His mother. His blood ran cold. Was it possible? Was the woman on the voicemail, the one warning someone about his father, the same voice he'd heard calling his name? Noah couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, a piece of the puzzle just beyond his reach. The voicemail. The warning. His mother's voice. Had he heard it? The more he replayed the clip, the more he convinced himself that it wasn't just paranoia. It sounded like her. It had to be. But how? If his mother had died in the fire 5 years ago, how could her voice have been in a voicemail, one sent the same night of the blaze? With the weight of the puzzle pressing down on him, Noah needed air. He drove into town, though he didn't know exactly why. The house was suffocating him. The secrets were suffocating him. He needed to clear his head, and the familiar streets were the only place that still felt real. He parked in front of the small cafe where he used to meet friends before everything fell apart. The warm light spilling out from the windows was a reminder of simpler days, before his world had been consumed by loss and unanswered questions. Inside, the clink of dishes and quiet chatter filled the air. But something else caught Noah's eye. A woman, standing at the counter, her back to him, ordering tea. Her posture, the way she held herself, it felt too familiar. Noah's heart stuttered in his chest. She turned to leave, and Noah's breath caught. She had the same face, the same eyes, the same everything, but younger, so much younger. Her hair, longer than his mother's ever was, curled softly at the ends, the light catching it in a way that made Noah's stomach twist. She was almost his mother's exact mirror image, down to the gentle tilt of her head, the curve of her lips when she smiled. But this woman wasn't old. She wasn't sick. She wasn't his mother. The cold grip of confusion spread across his chest. He stood rooted to the spot, unable to tear his eyes away. She reached the door, and then, as if sensing his gaze, she turned. Her eyes met his, and something flickered in her expression, something he couldn't quite place. She didn't smile. Instead, there was a flicker of recognition. Not towards him, but something behind his eyes. Before Noah could say anything, she turned and walked out into the night. Noah rushed out after her, pushing through the door into the crisp evening air, but she was gone. Vanished. The street was empty. The sound of his heart pounding in his ears drowned out everything else. He glanced down at the sidewalk, no sign of her, not even a shadow. It was as if she'd never been there at all. Confused, Noah walked back toward his car, trying to make sense of what had just happened. His hands were shaking. Could it have been his mind playing tricks on him? But the woman's face, her eyes, he knew it had been her. He'd seen it before. He knew her. That night, as he lay in bed, his thoughts whirled. He replayed her face in his mind. The same face that haunted the photograph. The one with the mysterious man. The man who looked like Mr. Wallace. Suddenly, it all clicked together like a slow-motion realization that paralyzed him in the darkness. The woman at the cafe, the one who looked like his mother, was the same person as the one in the photograph. His mother as a teenager. But it couldn't be. His mother had never been that young. She had always looked older to him, worn, tired from life, from the fire. That face in the photograph, was it her? Or was it someone else entirely? He had to find out. The next morning, he did something he'd sworn he wouldn't. He went to Mr. Wallace's house. The same tightness in his chest from the night before constricted as he knocked on the door. The man wasn't going to answer. Noah knew that. But something compelled him to try again. This time, there was no answer. Frustrated, Noah turned to leave. But then, through the crack in the curtains, he saw her, the woman from the cafe, standing at the window. She was looking directly at him. Her face expressionless, like she had been expecting him. Without thinking, he walked around to the side of the house and peered through the back gate. The woman was nowhere to be seen, but the window was still open. He reached the door, hand trembling as he grasped the handle. Suddenly, the door opened, and Mr. Wallace stood in the doorway, pale and disheveled, just as before. "You shouldn't be here," Wallace warned, his voice barely above a whisper. "You need to stop." Noah's voice faltered. She's here. I saw her. The woman who looks like my mother, who is she?" Wallace's face paled even further, his eyes darting nervously over his shoulder as if expecting someone to overhear. "She's not who you think she is. You need to stay away from her. It's not just the house you need to worry about." "I don't care anymore," Noah snapped, his frustration boiling over. "I need to know the truth. Who is she? Why does she look like my mother?" Wallace grabbed him by the arm and pulled him back, closing the door behind him. His voice was low, urgent, as if speaking louder would invite disaster. Clara Vale, Wallace whispered, his words heavy with dread. She's not who you think she is. She's part of this. She's part of your father's past, and your mother knew about her. But you shouldn't be digging any deeper. Noah shook his head. You're not making sense. Wallace's eyes filled with terror. You will, but you're not ready for it. You're not ready to know the truth about Clara. And you're definitely not ready to know what happened to her. Noah couldn't stop thinking about Clara Vale. The name echoed in his mind like an unfinished sentence, and the more he thought about it, the more the pieces began to shift slowly, like a jigsaw puzzle trying to reveal its true image. Clara Vale, part of the past, part of his father's life. And whatever she was to his father, she was also tied to his mother's death. The fire that had burned his mother alive, only to be blamed on a tragic accident. The fire that had left him with only questions and a lifetime of unanswered grief. But now, Noah knew that everything he thought he knew about that night had been a lie. His father had been hiding something, and he wasn't the only one. That afternoon, Noah sat at the worn wooden desk in his father's study, the dust thick around the edges of everything. He opened the file drawer, where his father had kept what few personal papers he hadn't thrown away, and sifted through the brittle documents. His fingers brushed over old bills, expired life insurance policies, a few unopened letters. But it was one folded, yellowed newspaper clipping at the very back that caught his eye. It was a local article. The headline read, "Fire ravages the Brown family home. Tragic loss of life and unanswered questions." The words "unanswered questions" stood out. His heart thudded in his chest as he read the article. According to the paper, the fire had started late at night, a devastating blaze that consumed the Brown family home in less than an hour. His mother had been found in the kitchen, trapped by the flames, the very place Noah had heard her voice calling his name. But there was something else in the article, something buried deep in the last paragraph that made Noah's pulse spike. Fire investigators believe foul play was involved. Authorities suspect the possibility of arson, but no evidence has surfaced to confirm this theory. In the weeks leading up to the fire, the late David Brown had taken out a substantial life insurance policy with a beneficiary whose identity has yet to be confirmed. Sources claim that the woman in question was not a familiar name in town, and authorities are still working to identify her. Police have refused to comment further on the investigation. The insurance payout. A mystery woman. A potential murder. Noah felt the walls of the house closing in on him. His father hadn't just let his mother die in that fire, he might have been the one to orchestrate it. And the woman? Clara Vale. She had to be the mystery beneficiary. Noah's hands shook as he grabbed his phone, searching for any trace of Clara Vale. He scrolled through page after page of dead ends, until finally, buried in the farthest reaches of a private archive, he found something. A marriage certificate. His father's name. Clara Vale's name. The woman was his father's wife. His chest tightened, the truth unfolding in front of him like a nightmare coming to life. Clara Vale wasn't just an affair. She was his father's wife. The woman who had been his mother's replacement, the one who had taken everything from Noah. And his father had kept it all hidden. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a conspiracy. His mother had been murdered, and his father had orchestrated it, not just to get rid of her, but to claim a life insurance payout for someone he'd replaced her with. The rage flooded Noah's system in waves, as hot and blistering as the fire itself. His father had been a murderer, a liar, a man who'd destroyed his family for money. And the woman he'd married, Clara, had been the catalyst, the hidden force that had pulled the strings. But the truth wasn't over yet. Noah needed more. He needed to find Clara. He needed to know why she had done this, what she had gained from it. There was only one person who could answer that. He needed to confront Mr. Wallace again. Noah drove out to the edge of town, where Mr. Wallace's house loomed at the end of a long, isolated road. The man was the only one who had warned him, and the only one who knew anything about Clara's connection to his father. As Noah walked up to the front door, the air felt thick with tension. The wind howled, making the trees creak and groan as if echoing the house's long-held secrets. Wallace answered the door before Noah even had a chance to knock, his eyes shadowed with fear. "You found it, didn't you?" Wallace's voice was tight, strained. Noah nodded, holding up the newspaper article. "Tell me everything. Tell me about Clara." Wallace stepped aside, and Noah followed him into the dark, cluttered house. He didn't need to ask for permission. He already knew Wallace had been waiting for this moment. "The fire wasn't an accident," Wallace began, his voice low, as if speaking too loudly would make the truth too real. "David planned it all. He was in debt, drowning in his own lies, and when your mother started to suspect something, well, he couldn't have her ruining everything. So he set the fire. And Clara, she was part of it. She was his alibi. Wallace paused, his face grim. Clara Vale wasn't just your father's lover. She was his accomplice. Wallace's words were heavy, each syllable carrying the weight of the past. When your mother started to figure it out, Clara took her place. Your father couldn't let her go. Not then. Noah stood frozen. His mother, his real mother, had been replaced with an imposter. A woman who had burned alive in the fire meant for his mother. And Clara? She had known. She had been the one to destroy it all, replacing the woman who should have been his mother. But the worst part? Clara wasn't just a murderer. She was a part of his blood. Noah needed to confront her. He needed answers. Noah couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that something much larger was at play. All the clues had led him to this point, Clara Vale. The woman whose name had come up time and time again, the woman who had been at the heart of the fire, and the woman who had somehow been tied to his father's twisted conspiracy. But she wasn't just the lover. She wasn't just the accomplice. Clara Vale was more. Noah had seen her face, the face of his mother, and now he had to confront her face to face. He had spent hours searching for her, following every lead he could find, but Clara had been living off the radar. She had gone to great lengths to vanish, but he knew she hadn't disappeared entirely. The truth always had a way of creeping back to the surface, no matter how deep it was buried. After days of fruitless searching, he finally found her living under a new identity in a small, nondescript town several hours away from his childhood home. It was like the world had swallowed her whole, yet there she was, hidden in plain sight. Noah stood outside her small, run-down house, staring at the peeling paint and overgrown yard. The quiet, isolated nature of the place was starkly different from the house he had grown up in, but something in the back of his mind told him this was where the answers lay. This was where everything would either make sense or spiral completely out of control. He knocked on the door, his heartbeat louder than his fist on the wood. A moment passed before the door creaked open, and there she stood, Clara Vale. She hadn't changed. Her face was older now, but the resemblance to his mother was still undeniable. The same sharp cheekbones, the same piercing eyes, the same unsettling calm. She studied him for a moment, not surprised, just wary, as if she'd been expecting him for far longer than he had expected her. "You've been looking for me," she said softly, her voice as smooth and cold as ice. Noah didn't speak for a long moment. He couldn't. The words were stuck in his throat, a mix of anger and confusion choking him. Finally, he managed to ask, "Why? Why did you do it? Why did you replace her?" "My mother." Clara stepped aside, her gaze unwavering, and motioned for him to come in. Without a word, Noah crossed the threshold, entering the small, dimly lit living room. Everything about the place felt wrong, like a house built on lies, a house meant to keep something buried. "I didn't replace her," Clara said calmly, sitting down on the worn couch. "I saved her." Noah's chest tightened, a knot forming in his stomach. "Saved her? From what?" Clara's lips curled into a thin, almost regretful smile. She folded her hands in her lap and looked away for a moment before speaking, as if choosing her words carefully. "The woman you called your mother was never your real mother," she said slowly, her words chilling Noah to his core. "She was a replacement, yes, but not in the way you think. I was the one who saved her from your father." Noah felt his heart race, a sense of disbelief overtaking him. He shook his head. "What are you talking about? My mother. She was my mother. She loved me." Clara's gaze locked onto his, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something genuine in her eyes, something almost human. "Your real mother was never meant to survive that fire. It was your father's plan all along. The fire wasn't an accident. It was a means to an end." Noah sat down across from her, his mind struggling to comprehend her words. His breath was shallow, his chest tight. "What are you saying? You're telling me my father, he planned the fire? He killed my mother?" Clara nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving his. "Yes and no. Your mother was never your father's first choice. She was always second. He wanted me. But after everything he did, after the lies and betrayal, he knew that keeping her alive was the only way to keep his secrets buried." Noah felt his world tilt, his thoughts spinning. But you're my father's lover. You were a part of it too." Clara didn't flinch. "I wasn't just his lover. I was his secret. I was his undoing too." You see, your father wasn't just a liar. He was a man with many faces. The man you knew was a mask. Noah's head swam, the room growing darker around him. You're saying you're my mother's replacement? Clara stood, moving toward a cabinet across the room. She opened it, revealing a dusty, weathered box tucked away in the back. Not a replacement, she said softly as she turned to face him. I was your real mother. The woman who died in the fire was nothing but a shadow. And when she died, I took her place. Noah felt the ground beneath him tremble, his mind racing to catch up with the torrent of emotions threatening to drown him. He stood, his body trembling with a mix of horror, anger, and confusion. You're lying, he said hoarsely. You're telling me you were my mother? You were the one who raised me? Clara reached into the box and pulled out a small, old photo album. She flipped through the pages and handed it to him. Look at the photographs. Look at the woman you called Mom. She wasn't who you thought she was. Your father, he replaced her. But I never stopped loving you, Noah. I was forced to watch as she wore my face, but you weren't meant to know. Noah's hands shook as he leafed through the album, the images flipping past his eyes in a blur. He saw his mother's face, the real one, a young woman he didn't recognize, someone he had never known. A woman with eyes that weren't his mother's. A woman who smiled at him in a way that felt alien. The truth was there, staring back at him. His real mother had been gone long before the fire. Clara Vale wasn't just the woman who replaced her. She was the woman who had always been his mother, living in the shadows, hiding her true identity to protect him from his father's darkest secrets. His father had kept her hidden, locked away from the world, and his entire life had been built on the lie of a replacement. Noah felt the weight of the truth crashing down on him, suffocating him with each passing second. What now? He whispered, his voice barely audible. Clara's gaze softened. Now you have a choice, Noah. You can walk away. Forget everything. Let the past stay buried. Or you can finish what we started. Because your father, he's still out there. And he has unfinished business. Noah's head felt like it was spinning. Everything he thought he knew about his family, his life, had just been ripped apart in an instant. His real mother had been hidden away, replaced by an imposter who had died in the fire orchestrated by his own father. Clara Vale, the woman who had raised him, was his true mother, but a ghost of the past, forever caught in a twisted web of deceit and betrayal. But there was still more to uncover. Clara's final words echoed in his mind. Your father, he's still out there. And he has unfinished business. The weight of those words hung over him as he stood in the doorway of his father's old house. He had returned here to the place that had once been his home, not just to confront the past, but to finish what had been started. The house that had once been a sanctuary now felt like a prison, a place that held the darkest secrets of his family. But there was something he hadn't uncovered yet. The locked door in the basement. It had rattled from the inside the night before, and he had heard the chilling note slip beneath it. You're not alone. You never were. The door had been sealed shut with chains, bolts, and a heavy padlock. But Noah had decided that no matter the cost, he would finally open it. He couldn't go on living in ignorance, not anymore. Not after everything he had learned about his father's lies and the truth of his mother's death. He needed to know what had been hidden in the basement. He needed to know what was left for him in this cursed house. He descended the basement stairs with a feeling of dread creeping up his spine. Each step echoed, the sound reverberating in the oppressive silence of the house. The air grew colder the deeper he went, and the darkness seemed to press in on him, as if the house itself were alive, watching, waiting. When he reached the bottom, Noah saw the door in front of him. It was worse up close. There was something deeply unsettling about the way it stood there, untouched, as if the years had not passed at all. He stared at the chains wrapped around the door, his mind racing with possibilities. Without hesitation, Noah stepped forward and began to pry the chains away. Each click of the lock was like the sound of his own heartbeat, quickening with each turn of the key. Finally, with one last tug, the door creaked open. A foul, musty odor hit him immediately, something ancient, something wrong. He stepped into the room, the dim light from the hallway barely illuminating the space. The room was small, barely big enough for him to move around in, but what caught his eye first was the figure crumpled on the floor. A woman. Noah's breath caught in his throat. He could barely make out her form in the dark. She was barely conscious, her body emaciated and burned, her skin raw and discolored. Her clothes were tattered, and her hair clung in matted strands to her scalp. But despite her condition, despite the years of neglect and abuse she had clearly suffered, Noah knew who she was the moment his eyes locked with hers. His mother. The real mother. He rushed to her side, his hands trembling as he gently touched her shoulder. She flinched at the contact, but then her eyes opened fully, and she stared at him with recognition. "Noah," she whispered hoarsely, her voice raspy and broken. You came." His heart shattered as he looked at her, his mind struggling to grasp the impossibility of the situation. "Mom? Is it really you?" She nodded weakly, her breath shallow. "I'm so sorry for everything." Her voice trailed off into a weak, painful cough. Noah's mind was racing. "Ow. Why? Who did this to you?" His voice cracked as he asked the question that had been plaguing him for so long. "Who put you down here?" "Why didn't anyone?" I was never supposed to live." Her voice was barely a whisper now, her eyes drifting in and out of focus. "They wanted me gone. Your father, he didn't want me anymore." Noah's chest tightened with fury and heartbreak. The man he had called his father had done this. He had hidden her away, trapped her in the basement, pretending she was dead while another woman, an imposter, took her place. "Why didn't you come for me?" Noah asked, a bitter pain twisting in his gut. "Why didn't you try to find me?" "I thought you were." "I couldn't," she interrupted, her voice barely audible. "I couldn't. They said if I ever came out, he would kill me." Noah's eyes widened in shock. His father had threatened to kill her if she ever came back into his life. He had imprisoned her, his real mother, and had been willing to let her rot away in this dark room just to maintain his own secret. "Noah, I don't have much time." His mother's words were becoming more strained, her breath shallow. "You need to leave this place. It's cursed. What your father started. It never ends. The fire, it wasn't just to kill me. It was to erase everything. Your father, he's not done with us. He'll come for you too." Noah stood frozen, trying to process her words. The fire. The curse. The unfinished business. It was all starting to come together. His father's crimes weren't over. His past wasn't done haunting him yet. And then the most chilling thought occurred to him. The entity he had been hearing, the voice calling him from the kitchen. It wasn't his mother. It was the imposter. The thing that his father had created, a monster born from the flames and the lies. "Mom, I'm going to end this. I'm going to make him pay for everything." His voice was firm, determined. But his mother reached out a trembling hand, grabbing his arm. "Noah, you can't. He'll make you finish it. He won't let you leave. You're part of this now. You've been part of it all along." Before Noah could respond, a loud crash echoed from above. The house trembled as if it were waking up, alive, angry. The voice from the kitchen called his name again, louder this time, insistent, demanding. And Noah realized with a shiver that it wasn't his mother calling. It was the imposter. The thing. The curse his father had set in motion. Noah had no choice but to confront it now once and for all. His real mother was too weak to help him. And his father was still out there, a looming threat. He helped his mother to her feet as the house groaned in protest, and together they made their way toward the kitchen. It was time to end this.